that are happening in your world. 1, 2, 3 good things. That's it. Pregnant, pregnant. I know. Also, I don't even know what kind of willpower it took for you to not share that info, but that was the first thought that popped into my head. No,
She made it 6 weeks.
I just. Yo. Things. That's not one of the good things. 2 things. 2 more good things. 2 more good things happening in your world. There better be stuff that are really good. What'd you say?
I'll be married 30 years on the 25th.
You're gonna be welcome, and guess what? You gotta buy them an anniversary drink because 30 years is something to be pretty proud of. So that's awesome. Looked about it yesterday, and he said that the key to success is just do whatever Renee says.
That's
Very
right.
That's true. Good point. Good point.
He's right.
You're always right. I love it. I got Kaylee first, and then you, Sean. Kaylee.
I made the cutest Valentine's Day thing for Luke.
I mean, so hard. I love it. Sean, I guess I'll allow one more good thing.
I was just gonna say, this Luke got a heart tattoo with Lene's name on it at their anniversary years ago at family reunion.
Aw, that's my name tattooed and heart this year.
You know,
Down on you. Oh, wait, what?
Sean said he already has it.
Sean, you don't have to tell everyone. As a quick reminder, we will send out slides after, so I think there should be a sign up going around. If not, I'll get one started. If you want the slide, make sure you give your email and we'll send them out to you after. You got it from here? So you can handle it? All right, let's do it.
Awesome. Excited to talk to you guys today about the market. As I was looking at the statistics for this conversation today, it kind of put me down this like mental process of thinking through some things. And it's a weird analogy to stick with me for a minute. How many of you have parented teenagers before? That's such a weird transition to go from parenting little kids to teenagers. We're all of a sudden like the minute, oh, grandma down here.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I went from this process of like the minute I started to think I had it kind of figured out as a parent, and all of a sudden they become teenagers. I'm like, well, I've got nothing figured out. It's completely different. I kind of rethink my whole parenting strategy, right? Particularly with teenage girls at home. It's like a horror movie and comedy at the same time. But the point of the analogy I want to make of this is we are at a really interesting time as an economy in Utah. Who we were as a state, our identity as a state, what we've been known for historically has all of a sudden changed. And this is a really cool time actually for us to become be in our industry and be the agents, the professionals that we are, is because everybody in the state of Utah is trying to discover who we are as a state now, which I'm going to show you some statistics that clearly show that we've moved into this new realm of our identity as a state. And if we're changing the identity of our state, the way we approach business is going to change with that. So I want you to kind of think through that of what has worked historically for you or real estate agents in general in a smaller, more of a podunk state versus this robust, nationally acclaimed economy that we are right now. And who do we need to be tomorrow to really service the consumer, make sure that we're moving forward? There's a lot of really positive indicators that I'm so proud of our state, but it creates some really unique problems that we've got to figure out how to solve. And some of those will be done with fiscal policy, governmental pieces, who we elect will all play into that. But a lot of that is specific strategies on a local level that if you're not the person, if you're not the expert on how to guide the consumer through that, they'll look for somebody else for direction. And so before we jump into some of these statistics, one of the biggest things I always like to lay the foundation of the bigger point I'm trying to drive home, that I'm hoping all the statistics back up through our conversation today. But I kind of thought through this process is we think about the number of closed units that we'll accomplish this year. All of us just went through the process of putting together our goals for the year. We all have a transactional goal we're trying to hit this year that equates to a certain amount of gross commission income that will turn into net income that will affect the net worth of our family. However, if we just focus on the purely the closed units, this is where our business plans are gonna fall apart. Every single transaction that I've ever been involved with, either directly or indirectly, started with one thing. Every single transaction, I can say with confidence that it started with one thing. What was that one thing that is associated with every conversation? It is exactly that. It is a conversation. Every single transaction I've ever been involved with, every single transaction you've ever been involved with, it started with a transaction, or excuse me, with a conversation. The question is this, there's a couple things about the conversation that I want to think through. Number one is, what triggered the conversation? Was it you were driving down the road and all of a sudden your phone rang and somebody was bringing the conversation to you? Or was it you taking the conversation directly to somebody? Was it a piece of information that you put out there on social media, a mailer, a door knocker that triggered a thought in a consumer that created the conversation? One of the things we've got to be really, really clear with is, number one is we have to create more opportunities for conversation. But then it's not just the conversation, it's what is the value of the conversation. And to me, this is one of the coolest opportunities of our market right now, is the consumer doesn't know what that conversation should or needs to look like. Where over the last decade, they came into the conversation with some idea of what they wanted the conversation to look like. They're in more uncertainty than they've ever been. They're looking for guidance right now. And so as we work through the statistics today, my goal with this is not to, even though I'm going to overwhelm you with statistics and numbers today, my goal isn't for you to memorize all of these statistics and all of these ideas. My goal today is to trigger some thought processes for you to say, what stood out to me that was interesting from the conversation today? And how would I take that information and do something to create more conversations with my people? Is it me putting some information out on social media that could create a call to action that creates a conversation? Is it me calling my top people in my SOI to let them know that you were sitting in a room with the other top professionals in our industry, and there were a couple interesting points that you wanted to share with them? Whatever that is, what I want you to walk out of this conversation with is, how do I create more conversations of value better than anybody else? Because if you, and we'll kind of work through some of these statistics, but if you look specifically, for example, in Davis County, there's 116,000 households in Davis County. Of those 116,000 households, there's going to be a handful of transactions that happen associated with those 116 households. But somehow that's got to whittle down from 116,000 down to one. The one is the one agent that they choose that's going to represent them through a massive transaction in their life. How do we go from 116,000 households down to matching the household that needs your service and you being the solution to them? If we're not thinking that way, if we're sitting and waiting like what is the fly trap with the tape just hanging there, and we're waiting for them to come to you and get caught with you, that type of business does not work. It will not work. In fact, it feels like a trap. It looks like a trap to them. What we need to do is create something that they want to be a part of earlier on, that you're easily the solution for them through the transaction. So let's jump into this conversation. This was really interesting. And by the way, as part of the slide deck, one of the things I'll send out is every year, as you guys know, the U of U, their economic department puts together an economic report for the governor. I'll send out 2 PDFs with that. One of them is a quick summary that they summarize the information. The other one is a 200-page long PDF that if you're a real nerd and need some reading, it's kind of interesting, but a lot of the data we pulled was specific from that report. But this clearly shows a couple of things. This little graph here on the right, it clearly identifies how we're evolving from an infant state to a more of a teenager, next generation state within our country. So let's look at a couple of these. For example, the old Utah, we were considered a small state. Our population was ranked 34th out of the 50 states. But you can see that our population ranks 30th. So we're growing in population at a faster pace than almost any other state right now. We're one of the fastest growing states in the country. So now we're moved into that populous state. The second thing that's really interesting that's tied with that is how they track growth. historically, as you guys know, Utah's growth has primarily come from within by us having babies, right? That's actually decreased. The number of babies we're having in the state is decreased, yet we continue to grow at the fastest pace ever. So it's now what is happening in Utah that is attracting people to want to be a part of who we are. A lot of that could be attributed to our affordability historically, our economic job growth. The pandemic had a big piece of this because people could work from everywhere. Now they have the ability to work from their computer screen. So they wanted a computer screen near the mountains versus a computer screen near LA, right? Or whatever it was. So if you look at this, 34% of our growth used to come from in-migration from 2000 to 2020. So that's a 20-year span that we kind of sat at that 34. You can see from 2021 and 2022, that jumped from 34% to 61% of our growth has come from outside. If you think about your marketing strategy, how you as a buyer's agent particularly are telling your message, are you limiting your message to just these households here locally, even though almost 1 in 2 buyers coming from outside the state? That means you've just excluded yourself from being an option for half the buyers that are going to come into our market. So we got to trigger through. If we're going to tell that story, how do we connect with the buyers where they're at? The age of our demographic has changed significantly. 9.1% of our population historically has been 65 or older. This is migrating now to 20% of our population is 65 or older. This is a really interesting one. If you think about some of the challenges we're going to be facing as a state, our first-time home buyers. But this, if you look at it, is we've migrated to a bigger piece of our population being either that move down campaign or downsizing, or potentially a move up campaign from their first house to their second house. But it's really interesting to look at this migration. If you look at this also, if the overall pie graph of our age demographic is changing, this is directly related to our income increasing too, which is really important. This is one of the key lynch points of our economies. We got to figure out how to get our median income higher for us to become a more affordable market again. And generally speaking, somebody with a little bit more time in the marketplace will make more money than someone that's newer to the marketplace. So that's going to tie into affordability long term. This one's been a really interesting one, and I think one that's really healthy for our state is historically we've been considered less multicultural, with only 9.5% considered an ethnic minority. Well, now we've migrated to 23.3% in the ethnic minority. This is really interesting that they're projecting that we'll be 30% plus in 2040. So again, this plays into what is our marketing tactic. Am I presenting a value proposition that is attractive to all buyers, right? Or all sellers? This one is something that our state has done so well with. Is we've always been considered a strong economy, but now they put us in a category of an elite economy. So we know we've been talking for a long time about how Utah's been in the top rank from job growth, but tended to kind of ebb and flow a little bit, particularly because we're a very entrepreneurial state, right? But if you look at what we've migrated to over the last couple of years, is Utah's job growth consistently is the best in the nation. And the other one that's a new measurement that they're measuring states by is how states fared through a pandemic. And Utah was one of the top states in how we fared through the pandemic, from not only how we responded, but how quickly we recovered and grew through the recovery. So they consider us an elite economy now. Part of this is what's attracting a lot of the in-migration is people coming to our state. We look at what we call silicone slopes now. That 10 years ago, if someone would have said that to you, you wouldn't have had any idea what it was. But all of a sudden, we've marketed it to such a way that we're attracting high-level talent from other states, specifically Silicon Valley, in that high-tech, high-income wages that are going to help us offset Initially, it's causing a problem in that it's helping drive the prices of our homes to where it becomes unaffordable. But over time, it will also push our income up. That when interest rates soften, it will really help soften our unbalanced affordability right now. Which brings us to the last one, which is this is the biggest challenge that we have as a state right now, is trying to figure this out. There's no way really for the train we started to stop the train that we've got, this momentum we have moving forward as an economy, to basically say, whoa, stop growing Utah. We want our prices to come back down. That really isn't an option. What we've really got to figure out is how do we get to a more affordable market or be affordable to more people, even in a robust economy. And this is what our legislators, our government really needs to be thinking through is how do we create some new opportunity for affordable housing. Some of the things I'm going to show you today is that one of the challenges to play into this is not just how many people are moving here and not just what median income is and not what interest rates are doing. Part of it is we're so short on supply in Utah. And this isn't specific to the pandemic. It's we're literally a decade behind on supply, which I'll show you some of the statistics around that today, which if you look at it from a long-term perspective, you guys know I talk a lot about the opportunity to invest in a market, is even though from an investment standpoint, things are very expensive right here, but in a long-term play, like we're in a very strong position for long-term appreciation in our market, even with the appreciation we've had over the last couple of years. So these are some really good talking points of like, who were we as a state versus who are we now? And how do we now become the professional of choice that services this Utah, not this Utah? Okay, make sense? Let's keep moving on some of our conversations. You'll notice some of the slides I'm going to just touch on real quickly and move. Some of them I'm going to slow down a little bit. Please, if there's something you feel like I'm going too quick through, stop me, ask a question. Let's talk through it. But I've got a lot of slides to go through today. As normal, I over-prepared. So let's look at the National Association of Realtors versus UAR membership report. This one I think is really interesting to see that for the first time in several years, even all the way back to 2010, we've continued to increase. We've had our first declination in the number of real estate agents nationwide, also in the state of Utah. One of the things I hear agents saying all the time, particularly seasoned agents, is they're so excited for all these agents to get out of business. One of the things that I want to say about that is there will be a lot of agents that figure out like, oh crap, you have to work to make money in this business, and they will get out of business. However, we're going to see a lot of people continue to get in business. If you look back at this point, when we had a huge declination in the number of agents, this was a significantly different circumstance in which people got out of business versus this, okay? If you remember why we had a big shot up here is because we were overbuilding and on speculation. So a lot of homes were being built. There was a lot of people playing in the marketplace where they shouldn't have been, and a lot of people got burned. The problem with this, or this situation with this, is the people that were getting out of the business, this wasn't their primary source of income. They were making some money somewhere else and ultimately decided to get out of business because they're like, I'm not going to flip houses anymore, or I got to figure out how to get out of this investment property. But they were making money somewhere else. One of the things we're seeing here is that there's a lot more agents that are professionals that built a career out of this that aren't making money somewhere else, that they're going to hold on as long as they can. Even a lot of them to their own detriment, to be honest, is they're not willing to service the new Utah, the new economy, and get more into action than they've ever been. And they'll slowly die. So we'll see a lot of those people get out over time. But the offset to this is, even though we will see a lot of agents get out, the offset to this is right tonight, on this date, the day before Valentine's Day, we're going to see a lot of, if we could be a fly on a wall and listen in on the conversations going on in people's homes, a lot of couples conversation is going to look like this. Man, how are we going to make it this year? Like, our expenses are more than our income. What are we going to do? They're not going to go quit their job tomorrow because there's the great resignation, people trading jobs, the same job for a higher income that happened through the pandemic is over. So that they can't go say, I'm going to go from this bank to this bank and make 20% more. If they leave this bank to go to this bank, they're making the same amount of money or less now. Okay. So if they need to increase their income, what's their option? They got to figure out how to supplement their income. They're not looking to replace their income. They're looking to supplement their income. What are the top 3 ways if someone's going to think through how to supplement their income? The number one they think of is, can I be a realtor? Can I be a lender? Can I sell insurance? Or can I be a handyman, right? They're thinking of little things they can do on the side on their own time to supplement their income. Most people don't want to go cut grass for $100. They want the dream of selling 1 or 2 houses a year, would supplement their income by $20,000 to $30,000. So a lot of agents will come into the business trying to compete with you to be a semi-pro, not even a semi-pro, a hobbyist. Does the consumer need hobbyists right now? No. The consumers don't need fakers either. The people that say they're a career real estate agent, but they don't act like it. They say they are, but their activities don't show they are. Who they need is professional. They need pros in the industry right now. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that you can't not be a pro part-time. It's how you show up. It's the time you put into it, the education you put into it, your messaging that makes you a pro, not the hours you work in the business, okay? But I wanted to slow down on that real quick, because this is interesting just to see the percentage drop. This was an interesting graph, a little bit different than what we've looked at before. Johnny Christensen at the region put this together that I thought was interesting. I don't want to spend a lot of time on here, but there's a couple little things I do want to point out in regards to this that I think are critical to our conversation today. So let's take Davis County, for example, which is in our marketplace. What they did basically for both Davis County and Weber County and all the counties is they went and called the board and said, how many of your agents in your board would you associate as more focused on Davis County or living in Davis County versus Weber County? And then they compared that to, so Davis County, they came up with 1,796 licensed agents that are associated specifically with that county primarily. But then they pulled of every transaction that happened in Davis County, how many different agents were involved in at least one transaction? 2,867. So there's 1,796 that are more associated with Davis County, but their license allows them to sell anywhere in the state, 2,867. So it's interesting to me, that could be a realtor from Kane County that came and took a transaction from you that probably would have been a better solution for the consumer, because the way we operate now is more than filling out a statewide form. It's knowing the community. So the point I want to make with this real quickly is part of our consultation, both with our sellers and our buyers, should be identifying some things like this of just making them aware. For example, using a script somewhere along the lines of, and I'm shooting from the hip here, of, hey, did you know that there's only about 1,800 real estate agents licensed here in Davis County? Not to say that all of them are actively doing what I do on a day-to-day basis, but they are licensed to do business here. However, across the state, there are over 1,000 additional transactions that happened in Davis County from agents not even associated with this area. Meaning they more than likely just put a sign in the yard, hoping that someone would show up, or they had a client call them from across the state and had them write an offer on a home. How important is it to you to have somebody that knows the community and knows where the buyers are showing up to get you the perfect buyer for your home? So something along those lines, we need to start having these conversations to start. If you think about this pool, the minute you meet with a seller or a buyer, they're looking at it from a pool of agents. How do we narrow that down to you being the one? Is we got to give them the data to help them realize what their options are versus you and how they narrow it down to you. So this was interesting to me. It kind of made my brain go to this ugly math right here. But I wanted to share this with you real quickly just to give you some perspective on it. So we talked about Davis County real quickly. So my mind was like, all right, let me think through Davis County for a minute. So in Davis County, this H stands for households. In Davis County right now, there's 116,709 households. So one of the big changes I'm making in my own mind in regards to my own database is we think about our database in the form of people, right? Relationships. How many people do I have in my database? But I think for the evolution of real estate, it's not just how many people do I have in my database, but what is the pool of households within my area that I work, right? So if I look at that, if I was focused on Davis County, there's 116,000 households that will need a professional realtor to help them through a transaction within the next few years. If I look at this, the number of transactions in 2023 that happened in Davis County were 3,536. What that tells me is 3% of the households will sell in any given year. Now, remember, 2023 was the lowest number of closed units we've seen in over a decade, which I'll show you some statistics around that here in a minute. I anticipate we'll see a little bit more in 2024, but not a whole lot more. And a lot of that is not because there's not buyer demand. A lot of that is due to sellers being willing to trade a 3% mortgage on their current house to a 6.5% interest rate on their dream house. Okay, so that's what it could be one of the hiccups in our market. But if we look at the statistic of 3% of households And we take this, active agents of 2,867. Right now, I'm looking at that and saying, if we just took the number of households divided by the number of active agents, you only, if we were living in a democratic world, we would give and assign each one of you 40 households. Well, 40 households at 3%, that's basically one transaction a year per agent. Okay, and a downward pressure on agent commission, that comes out to about $10,000 per agent in a purely democratic world. The point I'm making with this is we got to understand that there's human relationships associated with this household. It's we need to, as a professional, the evolution of the real estate agent is knowing the needs of the relationship and also knowing the needs of the household. That's how we need to deliver our value proposition, is emotionally for a human relationship, how am I showing up for you? And professionally, transactionally, how am I servicing the needs of a household? What I mean by needs of a household, it goes beyond the transaction is, if you're doing a remodel, I should be the source of the contractors and the solutions. The other one is, potentially thinking through like a call to them saying, hey, my records are showing that your smoke detectors need to change out their batteries. Like that's where my brain's at, and thinking of how do I service not only the relationship, but the household. That's in my opinion, that is the agent of the future. And I think that significantly increases this percentage. If you're the person servicing the relationships and the household, your percentage of ownership of those relationships will significantly increase. You can see nationwide, the orange is UAR versus the blue is nationwide, but we work this down to potentially one transaction based on these numbers. But we see across the state right now, it's really coming in close to about 3.5 transactions per agent. If you take purely the number of transactions divided by the number of agents, nationwide it's 4 transactions per agent on average. But this is what begs the question. It's why are there some agents that are literally doing thousands of transactions a year versus the agent that does 0? They have the exact same license. They went through the exact same schooling. This is where we got to start thinking through. We can't show up to confirm what the consumer already thinks is all agents are created equally. We've got to change the narrative of, even though I have the same license as every other agent out there, the value I deliver on an ongoing basis, not just for a transaction, but an ongoing basis is different. If we're not taking massive action thinking that way, we're already behind the 8 ball, okay? Couple interesting things. This shows a snapshot of the Utah real estate market for 2023, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this shows up in 2024. If you purely took a map, the economic map of 2023, and overlaid it with the economic projected map of 2024, there's a lot of similarities, but there's going to be a couple key differences. So it's not a completely different world we're walking into, but what did we learn about last year that we can see, and how will it show up differently this year? So if you look last year, overall, there were 17% less listings taken in the marketplace, which equated to 14% less closed units in Utah last year, which actually ended up pretty good compared to a lot of places across the country. Some places across the country ended between 20 and 30% less transactions than what they had the previous year. Now, particularly for Utah, that's been a really, really robust market over the last couple of years. A 14% declination in comparison isn't that bad. However, if you think about it in relation to the number of closed units per agent, that's where we got to start thinking the competition per conversation, not the competition per closed unit. The competition per conversation is significantly higher than it's ever been. How many of you are competitive? Even though some of you didn't raise your hand because you're like, I don't want to raise my hand because I wasn't the fastest one to raise my hand. That's how competitive you are. It's time to be a competitor. To be a competitor, it's not just kind of showing off. It's like, how do I drill differently than anybody else? How do I know things better than anybody else? Like it's time to compete. It's time to really strap the gloves on and say, if I'm gonna play, I'm gonna play the best I possibly can. So I will tell you, as much as I love agents in general, the majority of agents right now are operating on hope. They're hoping things come together. They're hoping the strategies they use before work. They're hoping their people love them enough that they will call them when they need a transaction. I'm a big believer in hope. I think it's a big part of life. However, it's not a business plan. Okay, it's time to be a competitor. I anticipate that we'll see more transactions this year in 2024 than last year. It's interesting, if you compare Weber Davis County, one county in January had more transactions than January last year. One county did not, which I'll show you, but it's only time will tell. But this is what there's things in our market we don't control, but that's why I keep rolling back to the conversations, and we do control the number of conversations and the quality of conversations we're having. But this number I anticipate to go up. One of the things I really want to be careful of as we continue to compare numbers moving forward is as we start comparing this year versus last year, this number over here will start to look positive. I don't want to get overly excited about that, thinking that it means our market's back to where it was, because it's comparing it to last year, which was the lowest year in over a decade in our marketplace. So it's us, that's moving in the right direction, but what I want you thinking of is, of the number of transactions, how many of them did I own? And even more importantly, of the number of transactions that are lining up for tomorrow, how many of those conversations that I own this month that are going to trigger into a conversation next month, the next month, or even in the next 6 months, okay? One positive on here is housing affordability, which has continued to plummet in the state of Utah. Actually moved in the right direction. We went from 69 to 71, still far off from the flat line or the equal affordability of 100, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But I did want to point out that increase. If you look at this, it's the number of existing home sales across the country. You can see that 4.1 happened in 2023. The last time we were at 4.1 was 2008. Before that was all the way back to 1995. I was a pimply little teenager running around in 1995. That's significant. If you look at how long most of us have been in business, I got my license in 21. I mean, we had a good run up there. And then even when we thought the world was ending here, it was only as low as it was here, and it continued to run up since then. So the point again, it's time to be a competitor. There's going to be more agents per transaction than ever before. How do you solidify that you're at the bottom of the funnel, that you are the solution? Not just the one they land on, but you are clearly the solution for the consumer. This is based on new homes sold. One of the interesting things here, if you look at the purple line, I need that. How do I hide this little thing? Got this?
On the chat.
Got this? Someone? Yeah. Okay, purple line is the 21-year average. That's what I wanted to see on there. If you look at the 21-year average of annual home sales, you can see where we should have been operating, where we were significantly below the average, but it offsets that we were over the average for a significant amount of time as well. U.S. home prices by year. This one's really interesting. If you look at the yellow line, they track the long-term average of 4%. The government wants to see us appreciating at about a 4% appreciation. You can see what happened over the last several years. This is one of the reasons, because Utah's economy is so strong, the government's fiscal policy was focused on how do they catch all of these other states, the averages across the country, up to the yellow line. Well, because we were already a strong economy, we over appreciated in our market and continued to grow beyond this before any fiscal policy was changed. If you look at where the yellow line is right now, if you look last year, basically it was flatline. If the U.S. home price stayed flat for 2 more years, in essence, the yellow line would catch up in about a year and a half. So it's really on a U.S. scale, it's not that far off from what they want to see from the long-term national scale. compare this to Utah's in 1 second. In US, the home prices by month, this is where it's really interesting to see what, how interest rates have affected our median sales price. Now, even though interest rates have changed significantly and gone up, we anticipated exactly what the government wanted to see is some element of flatlining. And particularly in Utah, we saw a declination in the average or median price, which across the country, it really was on a median across the country was a flat line. But this, if you break it down into the actual home payment, it's interesting how many home buyers will look at a price of a home and get frustrated with the overall price, but they forget what it really comes down to is their ability to pay for it on a monthly basis. That's where affordability shows up for them for the most part. And this is where it's a significantly different story for them. Is you look at the median home payment across the country went from the 800s to $2,000 a month. That was a much faster acceleration on what it costs to own a home versus how quickly income was increasing. So this is where the majority of consumers, even in our own market, even though we're looking at the US here, this is the big brainstorm that's going on for our consumers right now is I believe owning a home is still the American dream. I still would love to own a home. I want something to call my own. And I've got this much income to work with. How much of this income am I willing to spend to own the American dream? Where before it was less of that total amount, it's now a bigger piece of that amount. Now, they don't have the foresight to consider that at some point they might be able to refinance and it will take less of their income, but that's some element of a risk for them, right? An unknown for some of them to be able to coach them through that. But this to me is what is causing buyer hesitation across the country. However, one of the big advantages we have in the state of Utah is our buyer pool went from this to this, but there's still a bigger buyer pool than there are properties. Like, are we in agreement that there's still a pent up buyer demand of people that want to buy things right now? This is really fortunate for us compared to some states that they don't have the buyer demand. They don't have buyers that want the property even at the current prices. So this to me is a blessing of our market, but it also is one of the scariest pieces of our market is if interest rates go down too quickly and we have a lot of buyers ready to go and not enough sellers, even if interest rates went down to 5.25, that would trigger a lot of more buyers to come into the market. But yet, are there still sellers that wouldn't be willing to trade a 2.8% rate for a 5.5? My concern is, can we create enough inventory fast enough that our prices don't get out of control again and even a bigger acceleration than we've had before? That's my biggest concern for our market. That was a dramatic pause. This is Utah. So remember when I showed you the US, it was 12% above the trend line. Because Utah's had such a big run up, the long-term average of 4%, we're 67% above the trend line. Now, this is a lot of what I'm sharing with you today is if the numbers on the screen, it's data. If it's me talking about it, it's my opinion, right? And so you can take my opinion for gospel or not, doesn't matter to me, but it's my opinion either way. Because we started the conversation with Utah being a new Utah. If you believe that Utah is a completely new place, a completely new state, a completely new opportunity, attractive in a new way to new people, my argument would be this trend line isn't accurate anymore. Because of what it's saying is, if old Utah stayed old Utah forever, then it should follow a 4% appreciation. But if we've significantly changed the landscape of who we are, somewhere in here, I believe an accurate graph would slice this yellow line, probably somewhere right in here, and shift this whole line up somewhere. Where, I don't know. So I'm of the belief system that we're not actually 60% overpriced in our market. I believe that we are overpriced, but I would argue that we're closer in alignment with the 12% you saw on the national scale. But the question that only time will tell is when we get another decade of this graph, we'll see this blue line set the new, what should be the appropriate trend line for our state. But this to me is not a reason to think we're overpriced in our marketplace and to not get in. I'm still actively looking for investment properties in Utah, even though it's considerably higher price than a lot of markets I look in. So one of the things to consider here is, in your opinion, where should that slash be? And where should the new trend line start? I still believe the feds are gonna push for a 4% appreciation, but where should be the new baseline of measurement that they should start from? Anybody disagree with that? Even if you did, you wouldn't dare say it. Same thing, Utah home prices by month, median payment, again, because we've had a bigger run up. We've gone from the $800s to $2,500 a month in the average or the median home payment, which is significant. So a lot of this is really thinking through strategically is, are there lending solutions? Are there products out there? Are there ways for a consumer to get into a property and try to mitigate or reduce this, right? We're not gonna get into this concept, but I'd love to have a deeper conversation on it if any of you want to learn more about it, is most people don't know how to have a conversation around loan constant. We're talking about interest rates and an interest rate associated with a specific product, but most people don't know how to calculate loan constants. And a loan constant is comparing different products against the same purchase to figure out which loan product is the appropriate one for them. To me, this is a great conversation that most agents should know how to do, so that you could say like, yeah, on a 30-year amortization, this is what your payment would be. Let's compare it against 3 other products in the marketplace right now and see if there would be an opportunity to get this down to 2,200 or 2,100, right? We talk a lot about concessions and buy downs, but how do we compare products too, right? This is where we're gonna Tommy come up here in a few minutes to talk briefly around interest rates. If any of you want to get deeper into learning how to have a loan constant conversation, we're happy to get into that. This is also interesting to look at the median home price comparison. Blue is Utah, purple is the United States. Look how closely we followed it for a long time. This is where Utah started becoming that teenager. This is where Utah started to become a new economy of kind of figuring out who we are and getting our legs and getting our new identity. You can see that identity became clear here. Now, I would have anticipated this to start being consistent somewhere in here. We had a bigger spike here and we saw a correction of it. I anticipate that we'll see a little bit of a correction here, but I do not anticipate that we're going to get back in alignment with the US now that we've become the new Utah, the new who we are. I anticipate that we'll see a consistent spread, but we'll find that balance of some element of a spread in comparison. Home prices, again, this is no surprise to all of us. We've appreciated over all this period of time. You add that up and it's a significant run up. And you look at specifically across the US at 0.7 last year. So remember, Utah went backwards a little bit in 2023 and across the country, even with all the fiscal policy going on, still on a US on average, they're appreciated at just a little bit less than a 1%. This is what's caused the Fed to start slowing that interest rate acceleration down. Utah, massive appreciation. I mean, in 1 year, 25% appreciation is outrageous. So if we added these up, this has been a massive run up. But again, what I look at here is not necessarily what the number is and just assuming that we've over appreciated. What I want to look at is what caused the appreciation. Are the economic fundamentals behind what caused the appreciation still solid, still supportive in the state of Utah? Very much so. So to me, this isn't me looking at this like, oh yeah, Utah's over appreciated. Wait for prices to tank. It's a bubble, it's going to crash. You'll be able to buy your neighbor's house for half the price it is today. The people that are on that boat don't understand our economy. Okay. So this was supported fundamentally economically. Now, this one is a little bit outrageous. And I think that's what we're accommodating for, is kind of this last couple of years of double digits, 3 years in a row. So I think we're accommodating for that. We've already seen stabilization in our pricing. I do not anticipate that our median price will decrease again in 2024. I anticipate that our median price will actually increase in 2024 at a modest pace. And again, depending on how quickly buyers come to the market with product and how many sellers are willing to trade a lower interest rate for a different product. If those two things do not happen fast enough, we'll see double-digit appreciation again, because economically we're sound. It becomes a supply and demand issue at that point, okay? U.S. inventory, we all know that inventory is increasing. We can't forget though, that even though inventory and days on the market feel longer now, and we tend to like freak out about it, because we're not getting an offer within 2 hours of putting it on the MLS. They consider a balanced market 6 months. I like 4 months. 4 months to me feels, between 3 and 4 months still feels like your market's shaking and dealing, things move fast enough. There's nothing sitting long enough to feel stale or stagnant, but we're just barely getting into that 3 month mark as a nation, okay? So I don't want to overly freak out about this, is what we want to watch is what happens with this over the next little bit. I anticipate, again, depending on the inventory problem, new product coming to market, because I don't anticipate us getting really increasing our months of inventory on the market or our days on the market. Because this is a issue that we've talked a little bit about, but you look at the 54-year average of US new single family housing units completed. It's, even though you can't, over this period of time, you couldn't drive anywhere without seeing plywood somewhere, we're still so far behind on product, particularly when we get to Utah, because our net in migration is so massive. We have so many people coming here. We are so far behind on product right now. So it's interesting to me that we know fundamentally, economically proven fact, we are behind on inventory. Yet builder confidence is low. Why would builders' confidence be low when they know we don't have enough inventory? What would cause that? The interest rate, what else, Dave?
Interest rate insecurity, or I don't know.
So I think that's right. I think most builders are savvy enough to know there's a buyers want product. Their problem is are they willing to pay this much for the product? Okay, because what is happening with construction costs? They're softening some, but not enough, right? So somewhere along the line, this is the big stalemate in our market. It's the buyer's got to be willing to buy a product at a certain price. The builder, the creator, has to be able to bring it to market at a certain price for those to match in a healthy way. That's where we're off in a little bit in our scale. I will tell you, my development in Phoenix is, I priced it a year ago compared to today, and my development costs are lower, but not significantly 1 year later than they were a year ago. Right? But you can see the gap we have here of product coming to market, because when in 2008, 2009, when the market shifted, no builders were building. Nothing was coming to market. So it's literally going to take us the rest of most of our careers in this room. Even if people in gangbusters building, it will take most of our careers for them to finally catch up on product, which is interesting to look at this. Increase in Utah. Oh, I got to speed up. Increase in Utah
I
housing.
looked over here, I was gonna give you the signal.
To show everyone what the signal is. Increase in Utah housing units versus increase in Utah households. This one is interesting to me. If you look at the yellow, it's increase in housing units. Purple or pink is increase in households. And then red shows the cumulative shortage. And so you look at 2023, our shortage in 2023 was 30,014. But look what, just jump back here and look at how the gap on red. Red, so far behind that finally in 2022, they matched. But imagine how many years it's going to take to catch up on that cumulative shortage. And you can see that this last year, even slowing down on less product coming to market, but increasing the number of households or people moving to Utah, is we're increasing our cumulative shortage over time. Okay, it's interesting to consider. This also shows, I thought this was really interesting to look at. Davis County. This shows, this graph, or this column right here, shows 2021 to 2023 projected housing demand. And then this column, you can't see it there, but this shows over the last 9 years, how many units were created. So in the last 9 years, there were 18,000 units created. Think about how much building went on. If they did that again, they'd still be too short, because they're projecting they're going to need another 23,000. Weber County, they built 10,000, they think they're going to need 15,000. So again, even us building at a fast clip, catching up on that shortage is going to be interesting in our market. Okay. And then on the other side of that is for the developers to figure out, how do I buy a piece of ground at a fair enough price? How do I develop it at a fair enough price? Can I get cities to maybe give up a little bit on their density to let me build more units on a smaller piece of property because the price of the ground, like these are the conversations that are going on to figure out our marketplace. Did you just go get a blanket?
I'm so cold.
It's like 110 degrees in here. Maybe that's- we already talked about that. Interesting percentage of new residential listings sold. It's still very high. We know this to be the case, that the buyer pool remains high. Yeah, this is a huge advantage of our market is Utah is still super desirable. People want to be here, which is a big deal. Average number of homes for sale. The only reason I'm pointing this out is the consumer tends to freak out about change, any little change that's going on. We got to make sure we as agents, we're not jumping on the freak out train with them when they say a statement of fact. It's your job to be knowledgeable, right? So if they say things like, oh my gosh, there's so many houses on the market, nothing's selling right now. Well, if you look at the 21-year average of the number of homes that should be out for sale, because we've been well below that for a long time. Like this is not an unhealthy number of homes for sale at a given time. If you compare it to the long-term historical trend, it's not this, which everyone's comparing it to, but this, to me, particularly this gap here, it's now the consumer's like, well, I don't want to be the house that doesn't sell. I need a real professional. Here, this person was like buying a for sale sign from AutoZone and putting it on their house, right? And they thought they were going to sell their house, and some of them were successful at it. This, to me, we should look at this as an opportunity as agents to express our professionalism if we choose to be that person. Real quickly on Davis County. And we'll show these slides out for you to look at. A lot of this is just talking about a lot of the data that we've already looked at. But the thing I want to look at is if you look at December's numbers for Davis County, or through the end of the year, last year, again, we looked at the total across, but Davis County sold 13.45% less last year. But this is where I'm really going to start tracking this. This compares January of 2024 to January of 2023. So if you look at this, in Davis County, we did more closed units in Davis County in January of 24 than what happened in 23. So we did 13% more closed units in Davis County. However, if you look at Weber County, there was 10% less transactions in 2024 January versus 2023. So it's interesting, a county next to each other told a little bit of a different story on how they're showing up. So this is where I'm really curious. This is one of the things that's really encouraging to me over the last several weeks. I've probably had, I don't know, 80 to 90 one-on-one conversations with top producing agents in multiple states across the country. And one of the things that I'm asking them all at the start of that conversation is, tell me about the number of conversations you're having right now. And the encouraging thing for me is almost every single one of them says the exact same thing. People are coming out of the woodworks. Like people want to talk about what's going on in the market. They're thinking about a transaction this year. A lot of people had a need last year that sat on the fence that are coming to fruition. My prediction at the end of last year is I didn't think the people were going to come out of the woodwork until April or May of this year, but I thought they were going to come out in droves. But what I've seen is they're already coming out. The question I would ask you is, are they coming out for you? And the other question I would ask you is, even if you are having more conversations, if you look at your total SOI, the ones you're not talking to, who are they talking to? Because a lot of them are having conversations too. Might be with their hairdresser, might be with their nail person. They want to talk about the real estate. The question is, are you taking the conversation to them? Let's talk interest rates for a minute, because this is obviously going to be a big indicator of what's going on in the market. I asked Tommy, we can come up for a second. Yeah. Tom, just as a quick intro here, a lot of you know that we own Unity Home Loans as an agent-owned mortgage company. So a lot of you are partners with me in the mortgage company. We're the largest agent-owned mortgage company across the country, which to me, this is a huge piece of our strategy moving forward, knowing that as agents, we should own every piece of the transaction, not just to own the dollar, but to own the full experience of the consumer. That's what we've done with the title company. That's what we're doing with the mortgage company. Next will be the property and casualty insurance company. If you're not already a partner with us, I would encourage you to reach out to me. Let's talk about how to get you involved as a partner in these ancillaries too, to create a business opportunity beyond just the transaction of being a great real estate agent. I'm really excited to be in business with Tommy. Tommy, as you know, I'm a little bit behind on time, but let's talk interest rates for a minute.
Yes,
You're up.
all right. We're gonna do a quick economics lesson. We are behind time, but so we'll get through it quickly. Why are interest rates so high right now? Anybody tell me?
Biden.
Inflation, right? Inflation is a huge number you keep hearing. So what caused all this inflation? Anybody have any idea? Let's hear more. So a lot of spending, right? They say inflation is too many dollars chasing too few of goods. That's kind of the idea of that. So we spent too much money. COVID, we had to spend all this money. So inflation went up. The Fed funds rate went up. We're currently at about from 0% we had for so many years up to 5.25. So obviously rates are going to see that as well. So the Fed is under some pressure to drop the Fed funds rate. We're hoping that happens sooner than later. What we're hearing from the Fed is it's not going to. It's probably looking closer to May, June at this point from what the comments from Jerome Powell has said. So what he's wanting to see is a Fed funds rate at 2% is what their target is. When we do a 6-month average of where we're at now, 1.8% was our 6-month average. 8-month average was at 2.08. So we're seeing that those numbers actually being hit and targeted. So remember, data is lagging. They get data lagging. So hopefully we'll see the Fed see those numbers come in and that they'll lower that. When we see that, we will see rates start to come down. Today we had a CPI report that came unfavorably. We're currently down about 50 basis points, which isn't good for the market. So interest rates this year have been pretty stagnant, actually increased a touch. We had a good run at the end of last year, down to about 6.5. We are currently seeing about 6.5 to 7% right now. So that's kind of where interest rates are in a quick little economics lesson there. So
Did you want to touch on this one?
yeah, so obviously you can see the interest rates do follow the Fed funds rates. And as you can see, 0%, we were out there for quite a bit. And now we've raised significantly higher. That's where we saw the huge spike in interest rates. So as we see Fed funds rates come down, you're going to see credit be offered at a cheaper amount. And that's going to help people to one, get car loans better, credit cards, all these different things. Credit's going to be offered to people at a lower rate, which will help the economy. That's what the Fed's trying to do right now, is slow down the economy. You're feeling it, right? We're all feeling it. Anybody in the real estate industry is feeling it. Everybody else is starting to feel that because of what they're doing. So it is working slowly. If we can get the government to stop spending more money, it'll help quicker. So that's what we're going to hope for. We'll hope for the Fed will start to see these numbers and that they'll actually lower that rate, which will help interest rates. But as Marcus said, be careful, because I think that's a good conversation to have with your clients. If rates come down, what does that mean for your current buyers? There's going to be a frenzy, right? Could be more of a seller's market. Home prices could go up. So if people are on the fence, they want to get into a house this year, it's not the worst idea to get in right now, because maybe a little less competition right now. There are ways and options that we can help them to get more affordable. We can be like the builders that are doing 2-1 buy downs, temporary buy downs. We can help them get lower rates. There's stuff that we can help train them. And so that's what I'm here to do. I'm super excited to be here. I have this office right here with the 2 windows. I'm happy to meet with anybody. Love to go through all those options and see what we can do to help. So
Thanks, Tom.
yeah, thank you.
I just, on that difference between Davis and Weber County, one thing that jumps out to me is household income. In Davis County in 2022, household income was 101,000, and household income in Weber County was 82,000. So that's $1,600 a month that somebody has that they can use for home purchases, car purchases, whatever. So.
Great point. And it's interesting too to see, watching that median income over the last couple of years, that gap has lessened, right? Because there's a lot of people that are choosing to move past Davis County to come up for a more affordable house. And we're seeing that gap, but it is important to look at. And I think those are great things that we need to know when we're sitting down with the buyer. Same thing in relation to that, same thing that we just talked about with Tommy. If you go back to this, of every transaction will always start with a conversation. The one thing that I think is really important is over the last several years, a lot of times that conversation happened in a short amount of distance from the time the conversation happened to the time of the transaction. Because by the time they called you, they already had a decision made of what they wanted to do a lot of the time. Because it was an easy prediction. I want something, I have money coming in, I'm gonna buy it, and it's gonna go up in value. One of the things that I think is we're gonna see right now is we need to start this conversation a lot earlier, because there's gonna be a lot more processing and information that the consumer is gonna want to go through generally before they get to the transaction. To Tommy's point is we're anticipating a potential interest rate shift maybe in the beginning or midsummer. Those buyers are thinking about it now. They're the ones starting to process the conversation. If you wait to have that conversation with them, someone's already helped them process. The other comment that I'll have is part of this buyer consultation. I think we need to get Tommy and our lenders involved earlier on in the process to help them understand. I think there's a big piece of the buyer pool that wants to be in the buyer pool, but have already decided they've decided themselves they can't be in the buyer pool because of what they're seeing about or reading about prices and reading about interest rates. They've already decided they're out of the buyer pool when realistically they could potentially be in the buyer pool. Particularly, one thing that I think is really important to help people go through, if you don't know how to calculate this and go through it with your consumer, partner with a Tommy to sit down and go through it with your clients. But then they're looking at interest rate today at today's price, right? Or they're hoping that either home prices will come down or rates come down. But if rates come down, if interest rates come down, you're more likely going to be buying a higher priced house. Okay, so which is cheaper, higher interest rate at today's prices or lower interest rate at a higher price? It depends, right? Mark, David, do you have a comment there?
You can get the best of both worlds too. When I bought my house, it was back in 2002, and I knew I was gonna go ahead and refinance at a lower rate in the future. So what I did is I paid 0.5% more, so I didn't spend money on closing costs. And then within a couple months, I went ahead and I did an ARM at the time. And so that way I didn't pay any closing costs on the first one. And then I rolled in, rates were at 7.5%. I got an 8% rate. A couple months later, I got an ARM at 3.875. So
this is where we start bringing some solutions to the table of the rate you buy today is not the rate you have to have forever. So then you look at it and say, what do we believe interest rates will be in the next couple of years? Now, the one thing you got to be careful of is not tell them for sure rates are going to come down, because look at the historical average. But are we living in a world now where this is like somewhere in here is a new norm? We'll know over the next couple of years if this becomes a new norm somewhere in here. Okay. The other thing that's interesting is just comparing like a 30-year versus a 15-year or an ARM product. This is where loan constant comes in. It's saying like, let's look at the loan constant and compare 3 products and look at which one is most favorable for you. But the key is making sure if they think rates are going to be higher in 3 years, they should not be doing an ARM, right? So thinking through those possibilities with them. This was really interesting to look at to me. 89% of mortgages have rates right now have rates less than 5%. This could be one of the stagnant pieces of our marketplace is looking at purely 3% or less, 32%, 3 to 3.5, 27%. These guys are going to have a really hard time deciding to move. Unless they do what? Keep this house to rent it, right? What kind of rental income will they get off of that that can help them become qualified for a 6.5% rate on a new product, right? So this is a strategy I'm really focused on right now from an investment standpoint, is because a lot of these people feel like they need the cash out of this property to buy the next one. There's ways for them to get some cash out of it, stay in the home as an investor and move into a new property. But again, it's thinking through solutions of how do we unplug the drain to get the market moving. one of the things I'm watching is historical foreclosure activity to see what's going on. Is we have seen a little bit of an uptick in foreclosure activity, but not enough to shake a stick at. Like, I know some people are already out trying to get their REO accounts and things like that in place. I don't see it in there. I don't really see a high probability of us getting into a high probability of a high foreclosure or REO market unless something big catastrophic happens. And the reason why is people have a lot of equity in their homes. The challenge we're running into, which I've got some stats farther in the slide we might not get to, but to give you the premise behind it, this is the big determiner of this. Is right now, the average savings per household is very, very low. Okay, one of the lowest it's ever been. If people's savings are gone, but their spending habits are high, what do they turn to next? Credit card. So right now, consumer debt is the highest our country has ever seen it. So if once they max out credit cards, at some point, the credit card company is gonna cut them off and say, whoa, there's enough. If their spending habits are still high, what if their two choices are change my spending habits or where do I go next? The equity in my home. The question is did they burn their credit by not paying their credit card bill and they're not lendable to get a HELOC or refinance their primary residence? Or were they ahead of it enough that they can refinance, but now they're at a higher rate, but they're pulling the cash out? But there's enough options there that everybody that finds themselves in that situation isn't going to rush the market at once. But we probably will see this go up a little bit, but people have options of what to do with the equity in their home. The question is if someone gets to a point where they're really like in a bad buying decision, the problem is where were you 6 months, 12 months ago to have a conversation with them to create a different outcome? That's the point I want to make with you is, are you connecting with your people early enough? Are you the person waiting to capture them right here? This real estate agent that's the capture right before the deal, in my opinion, is the old school real estate agent that's going away. The agent that's here providing value is the one that will own transactions moving forward, okay? US affordability, interesting to see, even though in Utah, our affordability is below 100, on an average scale, we're sitting right at 100. This is a big piece the Fed's looking at it like, okay, we're sitting at an affordable market. We can't cause the whole country to get in an unaffordable state. So if you look at, we're looking at that just as a reminder, this yellow line, an affordability index of exactly 100 is what they consider a perfectly affordable market. Anything below 100 is an unaffordable market, meaning that you need more than 30% of the median income to buy the median priced home at today's interest rates. Anything over 100 means it's an affordable market. That's why people were going gangbusters buying investment property here, because it was an affordable market. They could afford to pay their own expenses on their house and pick up another property at that time. But we've seen that balance out some. Again, in Utah, we went from 69 to 71. The big indicator that will close the gap here is interest rates, median income, median priced home. If we stay pretty flat with our median priced home and median income continues to go up, that improves our affordability. If more of the people migrating to Utah carry a higher median income, that closes the gap on affordability. One thing to keep in mind is a lot of times we look at this and be like, well, no one should buy right now because it's an unaffordable market. I know I've said this to you before, but don't forget that even though this measures affordability across the state, every single one of your buyers and sellers has their own personal economy as well. Okay, that's why one person drives a 5 Series BMW and someone else drives a 1995 Mazda Miata, because they have different economies. One person can afford the BMW and one person can afford the Mazda Miata. Okay.
Do they even have that car anymore?
What's that?
Do they even have that car anymore?
Yeah.
Can you even find those Mazda Miatas?
You say that because you can't fit.
Right. Especially the convertible.
The convertible, the windshield will come up to the chest. The good point I'm making with this is why we got to get so much better about the buyer consultation. You have buyers right now that can afford our market. Particularly if you're telling a story outside of our market, when a California buyer comes here, when they're walking through one of our houses at $600,000, they're like, wait, you get all of this? You get all of this for the $600,000, right? It's affordable to them. This is the key with this is we can't let people just assume our market's unaffordable. We gotta be getting in front of people early enough to have the conversation. I'm just gonna touch a couple things on investment properties, 'cause I know we're almost out of time. But this was really interesting to me when they measure out, who owns all the investment properties, is mom and pop investors own 80% of all investment properties. Like, consider a mom and pop investor if they own 1 to 9 single family residents. This is interesting to me because there's gonna be a handful of mom and pop investors that potentially have overexposed themselves, or they're coming into their retirement years and they're thinking through liquidation. So think through your database. Who is in your database that lives in this world that has investment properties? Do you, as a real estate professional, know their long-term strategy? They might not want to own that property forever. They don't want their kids fighting about it when they die, right? So the point I want to make with this is, do you actively know what your database is trying to accomplish? Not just they're in my database and I have a name, a phone number, and an email address. A professional would know, I'm segmenting my database. These are my investors. I'm constantly making sure I have information for my investors on what their strategy is. This investor has 4 properties. I know they want to liquidate in 5 years, or I know they want to hold these long term. They're going to put them in the name of their trust. I need to build a relationship with their kids. Okay, those are the type of things I want to be thinking about. US. Yep. Gonna move this again. I know what I'm talking about here. What's that?
Loading.
It's something else. Loading meeting controls. Yay.
Boom.
Okay, this shows yearly rental rates. I'm not gonna jump into county, but this has been, any of you that own rental property know this to be true. Rental rates are going through the roof. This is what's interesting to me is a buyer that says buying a home is unaffordable. Guess what else is unaffordable? Renting. If you compare unaffordable renting and unaffordable home buying, which one serves them better long-term? Unaffordable home buying, if they can figure it out, because now they could own an asset that offsets the cash flow going out because you have an appreciating value, okay? But is the consumer savvy enough to know that on their own? If they're not savvy enough to know it on their own, who needs to be having the conversation with them? That's right. When do you need to be having that conversation with them? Not here. Here. Because in their mind, they're never going to be here, or they're years away from being here. We need to go create the conversation, okay? If you don't know how to have that conversation, it's a skill set to learn, okay? How would you bring that conversation up? A really easy statement is, hey, I'm calling a lot of my people in my database that don't currently own a home, just help them understand that a high percentage of people build their wealth by owning investment property. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that's investors. You're not a real estate investor, but I will tell you that it's not just the investors increasing their wealth by owning investment property. Primarily, it's single family homeowners that live in the home are increasing their wealth by owning the home they're in long term. I don't want to see you miss that opportunity. Can we sit down and have a conversation what that would look like for you? That simple, okay?
It's interesting to me to see, like, back in 2008, 2009 with the home, like with the mortgage, when you go back to that mortgage slide, what the payments were, and now with the rent, it's a couple $100 off. If you fast forward now, the average mortgage payment is 25, rent payment's 15. Where do they think that rate of rent is gonna go? If historically it's been a couple $100 off, to me, it's gonna be closer to the payment. So when they're like, oh, I can't afford it, well, wait a couple years.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be in a really bad spot.
Yeah, and one of the, I think the graph is right here that illustrates that exact point, what they call cost burdens, right? This to me is like, if you have anyone in your database that's considering renting, to look at this, look at Davis County. The blue here shows share of housing units that are renter occupied. So Davis County, 23% of all the households in Davis County are rented. And then the orange shows what percentage of renters are cost burdened, meaning they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. So remember, affordability in housing suggests that they're spending more than 30% of their income on maintaining a house. But if you look at cost burdened for a renter, 41% of renters are cost burdened. They're already spending more than 30% on housing. So it used to be a choice of like, well, I can't afford a home, so I'm gonna pay less to save some of my money renting it. They're not saving money. And this is a big shift in our market, is what they call multi-generational occupancy, okay? So I move into my parents' basement to save money to do it. That may be the case. Where parents say, I need to buy a home that has 2 masters in it, right? We're seeing some of that in our marketplace too. But this, to your point, Justin, too, is at some point, if interest rates remain high and mortgage rates, by the way, it's hard to compare because the average mortgage payment at 2,500 is across all properties, right? So it's an average across all properties, which if you segment that specific to investment properties, which generally are $500,000 and less, it probably might be, it's gonna be less than that, right? It's gonna be, the gap from rent opportunity to mortgage payment will be lesser, but the point is made. How did it come back? Came back. He was playing a joke on me. Okay. Did you say I got you that?
No, I said, I'm so hearing you right now, like, you touched the left, I feel like I can touch the left,
We are talked about that, using the build for rent.
but yes.
We are talking about a lot of stuff, that's why I'm going fast for this. It's so hard to cut slides out, because it's also interesting. The last thing I'll talk about real quick is some economic principles overall. A lot of people will talk about a recession. What actually is the definition of a recession? Yes.
Don't know 100%, but I believe it's Bitcoin. The pessimistic product, each individual person, we create less value per individual person on a global market.
Perfect. So you're, for how many quarters in a row? 2 quarters in a row. So that's what they look at, is that the GDP declines 2 quarters in a row, you're officially in a recession, right? So it's interesting to look at real GDP annual year over year. Is they thought we were starting a recession. This is when we saw a recession, a ton in the news. Our economy came back as the government put a bunch of money in all of our accounts and everyone was excited to go spend it, right? And that continued to be the case over the last couple of years. If you look at it by quarter, again, last year, even with the market being as crazy as it was, and people complaining about inflation, complaining about not enough money, we're good at spending it. No negatives in GDP last year. Unemployment remains low. Job openings remain intact. I mean, that all stays in alignment. This is going to be the interesting one, is inflation. One of the things that I think is really important with inflation to consider is the Fed target is a 2% inflation. We obviously got way out of whack here at 9% in the CPI. And then we're now down to 3%, 3.4%, somewhere in that range. We might continue to see it. One of the biggest mistakes I see people talking about with inflation right now is they think that because this is 3%, we're somewhere back to where we were. This is comparing to the year before, okay? So if you look at 12 of last year, we're 3.4% higher than what we were at the 6.5% here, okay? So it's comparing the prices of this date versus this date. So one of the things to keep in mind of that is that you don't think inflation's gone away, it's just slowed down, okay? Now, if you see negative, or if we see inflation go negative, that's when it starts going back to those prices. But historically, if you look long-term historical trends, anytime there's been inflation, it's really, really a challenge for prices ever to go back to what it was, or we'd all be buying a Coca-Cola for a nickel like our grandparents did, right? There's a spike of inflation, and then it's a slowing of inflation. And there's a spike of inflation, and there's a slowing of inflation. So one of the things to be clear of, and just as a side note, as you guys know, I'm really focused on helping us to shift our mindset from just gross commission income to net income, but also to net worth, is your personal budgets are not going to go back to what you were paying for groceries 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So part of our game plan is thinking through, the lifestyle I want to live costs me different today than it did 2 years ago. If I'm committed to this lifestyle and living this lifestyle long term, I must become a better real estate agent to protect more of the gross commission income associated with the transactions that are happening. That's your obligation to your future self, is to make sure that you're driving enough gross commission income through your value that you're living your life by design. Otherwise, your elevated budget, your elevated life by design, matched up with your old production levels is a recipe for disaster. Okay? They're projecting in 2024, they're doing everything they can to get this down to the 2.3%. They'll continue to use fiscal policy to do that. The interesting thing, we could break it down into, so funny, people used to pay so much for TVs, but now TVs are one of the things least affected by inflation. We already talked about this, revolving consumer debt. This is one of my biggest concerns, is how much consumer debt the world is taking on. Particularly, this makes me really worried for first-time home buyers. We look at that generation of 20s to 35. They're all driving really nice cars. They're all like, they're spending money like it's going out of style. And I shouldn't say just that generation. Most people are, but a lot of it's being paid from here. The problem is we have a really bad example of how to spend money. This is the Fed's debt. Okay, the Fed is saying that the Fed does the same thing. They're like, well, just borrow it. We'll just go buy it. Look what the federal debt is the highest it's ever been, significantly as well, which has its own issues to come with it. But to me, I'm really concerned about this for people's ability to buy moving forward.
Yeah, because we can't print money. Like they can print money, we can't print.
You can, it's just the consequences are different. Same thing, we already talked about this, personal savings rate has dropped significantly as well. Again, this is so silly to me, that we celebrated this as, oh, Americans are saving money more. But what this was is the government was basically forcing you to take money because they were depositing it into your account. Keep that on me real quick. I can't help myself. GDP. So this is Utah's GDP, which again has stayed very positive. In this comparison to the US, is you look at this, as our GDP has stayed really strong. I anticipate it will continue to do so over time. Personal income, we have seen some increase on personal income. We need this to increase at a faster rate for us to close the gap on affordability. That's going to be, even with interest rates coming down, if interest rates come down to 5.25%, 5.5% even, will still be considered an unaffordable market because of our income. So I don't anticipate rates coming down into the 4s. We probably will never even see them in the 3s again in our lifetimes, perhaps. But even the point I want to make is, don't think that just interest rates coming down to 5.5% fixes our affordability problem, because it doesn't. If you look at our median price at 5.5% interest rate, we'd still be considered an unaffordable market. Our income needs to grow with it over time. Okay, we've already talked about, I have a bunch of data and stats about that we're behind on construction. We need to create products. So one of the things to consider here is if you're working with developers, landowners, things like that, we're going to see more of those come to market. We have 1 minute. 1 minute of silence. Let me ask this question. Who's got a question from what we talked about today? And then I want 3 ahas from the group, what you're taking away from the conversation today. Any questions first? Yes.
Okay, so like 100 slides ago, it was talking about interest rates,
Is that
right?
you making fun of me for how many slides I have?
No, you would like, but we're not talking about. So it said in like 2010 or something, so it's been like 13 years, right? So it's saying that the interest rate was like 4.95. But we have it like, obviously we're above that now.
Yep.
So what, like, how long is like normal? Like,
For interest rates to change?
well, no, but like, so we talk about all the time, like, this isn't like this is an average rate, like an average rate, like, so it's been like 13 years of like lower rates. So how long, like, does that have to be like, this is a normal rate?
Well, when you look back at that slide, notice 2 things. I've got 2 going almost every slide. I've got like the averages over time.
Right.
On that slide, we've run it twice. We've run it since 1970s, and then we've run it since I think the 90s, just to compare the 2. Since the 70s, the average since the 70s is higher than what the average was since the 90s. What we're trying to figure out is like what really should be the baseline. So any measurement against the baseline, if you've got to determine, well, what am I measuring it against?
Okay.
And that's what we're really looking at right now is, even though historically you would look at it over like a 30-year average, the question we're asking now is the way the world thinks about money, the way money's evolves and rotates, is there a new baseline in which we should compare against? That's why I've got two baselines on it. Because I don't think we're gonna go, unless, I wanna be careful with this because there are things that could cause us to go into the tens, right?
Right.
But it would have to be some real, and like that would topple our economy, that would be some issue, they're doing everything they can to kind of stop the increase, to actually resettle us. I think we're gonna settle somewhere in the mid to high fives, is like the new norm, is kind of my guess.
Okay.
Do you think I'm off with that?
I think that's right on.
Okay. Which is, so honestly, it's a challenge for me with teenage kids, because I'm worried about them being able to buy a median price house in a couple of years at $750,000 at 5.85%. I'll tell you this, as a 21-year-old kid, it would have been a real challenge for me to do that. Now I'm looking at my kids thinking like, how are they gonna pull this off? It's gonna be an interesting generational shift on home ownership over the next couple of years. Okay, any other questions? Yes,
What's your forecast on appreciation, prices and then rent?
and how they,
Just independent.
yep.
Like what do you think we're gonna do over the next 12 months appreciation wise? And what do you think rent prices are gonna be?
Appreciation this year, I think is gonna be pretty flat in Utah. Because I don't think interest rates will change fast enough to drive a huge price up. I think we'll see enough, granted, if we get enough sellers come to the market. We get enough sellers come to the market, we'll kind of balance it out. I think we've got another year of basically flatline, maybe a small appreciation in the positive direction. I don't see a negative. I do see in next year, 2025 or thereafter, I think we're gonna outpace appreciation in the country again, just based off the massive amount of buyer demand we have. Rents, I think, appreciated too quickly. We're seeing, the thing that I'm watching, particularly with my own rental portfolio over the last couple of years, is we got overbuilt in high-end multifamily. So high-end multifamily right now has so many products that's gonna be the big choice for the rental consumer at some point is, I either went high-end multifamily and now I want a dog, so I'm gonna look at houses, what's the availability of a house with a yard, or vice versa is now homeowners that own houses, single-family homes for rent, want more money for rent. I'm just gonna go into this multifamily because there's an over surplus of those. There might be some deals on rent there. So we've seen rent drop, like most of my portfolio. I've seen probably on average 8 to 9% declination in rent from last year to this year on average. So I think we'll kind of stabilize for a minute, but a lot of it will be determined based off the multifamily vacancy rate. Okay. Well, any other questions? Okay, give me 3 ahas. This is how you grade me for how good I did today. So if you had no ahas, we just wasted an hour and a half of our time. Justin.
That 61% of is net in-migration, and that, like, if I don't have a good strategy to capture out-of-state buyers, like I'm missing half the people that are buying.
Love it. This to me is an actionable aha, not just a data point, but what does that mean for my business? Love it. Christy.
How we're gonna start the new Utah.
Love that. How are we gonna serve the new Utah? Let me ask you this question as a follow-up, then I'll come to you, Lene. If you stood outside Maverick today, because we all love our Maverick fix, right? And you asked every single person walking through the door today, what do you think of the new Utah? What do you think they're gonna say? What do you mean? So there's an opportunity to go create the conversation around new Utah. What does that mean? Now you have the talking points, and that's what's gonna trigger people to be like, wait, what? It's a pattern disrupt. Instead of you saying, hey, I'm a real estate agent, you need to buy or sell this year. It's how do you feel about the evolution of Utah? They're calling it the new Utah. How do you feel about that? Well, what do you mean? Now we're in a conversation. Okay. Love that. Lene.
I think you said with our people and solidifying the fact that we want to be the source for everything related to the home.
To me, my brain's working so hard on that exact thing right now of the shift of like, I've got a pretty good feel for a relationship. How do I build a relationship with a consumer? How do I be the solution for all thing household? Like realistically, if you probably great way, the thought process around that would be almost pull out a checkbook, my check register, and look back, what's every single expense I had this year related to my house? A landscaper, an electrician, a flooded bathroom, taxes, and then talk through like, okay, I've got a list of all these things. How would I be the solution for all these things? And how can I systematize it? Like, to me, that's the future of where we're going as agents. It's relational and transactional from that point of view. Thank you. So if I had to leave you with one thought and an action, this would be it. Is I'm going to share these slides out with you again. Don't get overly consumed in the data. What I would say is, what are one, two, maybe 3 points that you're like, oh my gosh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. If that was interesting to you, there's people in your database that are going to find that exact same thing interesting, but nobody's bringing that to them. So then I would ask my question that I ask myself is this: how would I create a pattern disrupt or a question in which would enter me into conversation with people on this point? How would I do that? And then I would say, commit your lead generation for the next 2-3 weeks. The 2-3 weeks of calling your people, you're not telling the same person the same thing twice. It's every single day. You've got your script down, you got the conversation, and I would make your conversation look something like this. Because I really like when you come to a class like this, to use this type of script for your entry to whatever you're going to share. Do the forward conversation, connect with them, how you doing, how are the kids, that yada, yada, yada. Then I would go to, hey, real quickly, I know your time is valuable, but I wanted to share with you that this afternoon I had the opportunity to sit in a room with about 30 of the other top producing agents in our marketplace. And we had a really interesting conversation around the direction of the economy in Utah. And we covered a lot of topics that probably are beyond what you're thinking is going to happen in the state. Do you have a couple minutes that we could talk through 3 specific points that I found interesting in what's going to happen in Utah this year? That easy. Then you have your 3 points. They're going to say yes to that. One of the key things I did in the front end of that conversation when I said I sat in a room with 30 of the other top professional real estate agents in our community, what did I just tell the consumer? That I'm one of the top real estate agents in the market, and that I'm learning for them. And I gave them, I don't just say, do you want to have an economic conversation? Can I share with you 3 specific points that I found really interesting about our market that are going to impact the value of your home this year? Something along those lines. Then it's digestible for them. Okay, so I would use a script along those lines. Okay, how many of you are going to take some element of action after this class and do it? Some of you are like, I'm raising my hand so he doesn't call on me, but I'm not going to do it. The only thing I would say is that now it's time for massive action. Don't overthink it. Don't think I need to work on my skill set. Don't think I need to role play for 10 hours. Just get after it. Let's make it happen. Really proud of you guys and really excited about this year. I'll keep bringing information to the table. Thanks for being here today. Any comments?
But Joel and Yancy with Equity Home Warranty, come on down.
Hi, guys. We're gonna take some action right now and tell you guys that, we're the professionals in the home warranty industry, all right? No one out there doing it better. So, is that good? Yeah, really good. So I'm Joel Hawley. This is Yancy Scott. We are the owners of Equity Home Warranty. Not a whole lot's changed with us. You guys, this is our 10th year of being in business. We opened back in 2014. Gonna hear about a fun 10 year.
I had hair. Joel got it all. Joel wanted it. Joel took my hair.
So yeah, guys will be hearing about a big 10-year anniversary party that we're gonna be doing this year, but we're still offering our best plan at $500. Okay, if you write in more money than that, that credit goes to your clients. Okay, so keep that in mind. Still offering the complimentary seller's warranty. If you have a listing, I know you got a lot of you guys in here are taking advantage of that. Put those on all your listings. Okay, we're actually doing one for Diane Albrechtson right now. We're helping her sellers with a water heater. She didn't have to pay for it, neither did they. Okay, keep that in mind on all your listings. They are sitting a little bit longer, I think, than what we're used to. So it's a nice tool to have on your listings. Okay, guys. We're not the biggest. We're a small little company, but we've been around 10 years, and we just do a great job of taking care of people. It's all about customer service with us, and we feel it's very important, and we've been passing that great service on to you guys for 10 years. So thank you so much for all the support. There's some amazing loyalty in this room, and we're grateful for it. We really are. Let's keep it rolling. We're gonna have a great year in 2024.
Right. Hey, that's just a good looking group.
Nice to be in front of so many agents. It's hard to get in front of larger groups these days, so this is awesome. We're-
Yeah, I throw in most offices, if I threw a hand grenade in there, it'd kill the hell. Yeah, I mean, this is walking, I'm like, all right, nobody's here, right?
That's disturbing a little bit. Without the
Our market share would go up. It would. You guys-
Guys are representing well.
Yes. Now, we brought some Obetas. We thought you were even at 12:30, so please don't blame us if it's a little bit cold. But it's still been covered out there,
It's
so
still one.
go get some Obetas. We love you guys. We appreciate you again.
We'll hang around for any questions you might have. Thanks, guys.
We'll be here.
Okay, awesome, grab lunch. Remember, anyone who's doing this time, if you want to stick around for a planning, grab lunch and then meet Christy right here. Does that work?